1 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance by Kathy Lewis, our clerk treasurer. All right. Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry, I started and then I was muted. Okay, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States
of America
and to the republic
one nation under
God,
indivisible,
justice,
with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Amen.
Now we'll open public comment. Certainly it can be open right while I read this into the record. At this time, the public comment will be taken on those items that are within the jurisdiction and control of the Board of County Commissioners. Public comment cards and comments left on the county's website prior to the board meeting have been compiled and made a part of the supporting materials that have been provided to the county commissioners and public for review. Only 2 periods of public comment will be taken during this meeting, once at the beginning of the board meeting and again at the end of the board meeting. Public comment will not be taken on each agenda item. There's only one on this one. Public comment is limited to 3 minutes per person who have left a voice message on Douglas County's public comment phone line, 775-783-6007. Once a public comment period has been opened, once public comment closes, the voice messages will be played to the public and county commissioners in order that they were recorded. No more than 1 voice message public comment per person will be played during each public comment period. The board wants to encourage the respectful consideration of all views by members of the public. If the content of any voicemail is willfully disruptive of the meeting by being irrelevant, repetitious, slanderous, offensive, inflammatory, irrational, or amounts to a personal attack or interfering with the rights of others, the voice message will be skipped to the next public comment. Public comment is now open and the county's public comment phone line is now available to take public comment. Public comment will remain open for at least 5 minutes to allow members of the public to call or until the last caller has finished leaving a voice message on the county's public comment phone line. After the last public comment has been played, the county's public comment phone line will be reopened to allow public comment to be recorded as the meeting progresses. So it's now open. We'll wait till we get any. Have you got any so far, Natalie?
Natalie Wood for the record. I saw the line ringing in, and so I'm assuming that they're leaving the message right now. So we should probably have a few coming through shortly.
All right.
Ah, man, I've lost everything.
All right, one just came in, so I will play it.
Opening public comment, Ellie, C-L-L-I-E, Waller, W-A-L-L-E-R. I reiterate what I stated at the April 2nd meeting, that we need to carefully analyze how the county should be spending our RDA dollars. With the recent announcement of the referendum audit going smoothly, we need to reevaluate the request for RDA 2 funds at $34.25 million for the event center and put this on the ballot so registered voters in the county can weigh in. The board members represent many constituents, and the referendum signatures prove that the citizens of Douglas County are in favor of this becoming a ballot measure. So when it's time to vote to forward the referendum for the Nevada ballot, you must take into consideration the greater good of all the people and not just a vote by 5 commissioners, which is not equally representative of the county's citizens. April 16th is not the date to raise the question of the RDA fund. It's fiscally inappropriate, and what happened to democracy? Democracy means rule by the people. The name is used for different forms of government where the people can take part in the decisions that affect the way their community is run. I disagree with Mr. Walder's comment and assumptions of needing the event center to break ground this year. This is not a boom or bust project for South Lake Tahoe. Actually, this is the cart before the horse. The Main Street plan, with all its proposed transportation goodies, must provide burden of proof of funding mechanisms, grants, etc., and what is expected in the way of funding from Douglas County. I also say that we need to step back and look at the Main Street plan. The question is, does the public works budget take into consideration the possibility of Douglas County, along with the city of South Lake Tahoe, owning a segment of the road in South Shore? TRPA must have reached out to the Douglas County Public Works to inquire about this. Has an analysis in the way of the initial construction costs been completed? And of course, operations and maintenance in future must be budgeted. Also included in the Main Street program is the proposed roundabout. I'm not sure if Douglas County is going to be a partial owner of that. I requested that the event center applicant ask the Transportation District of Tahoe to provide the county and public with a budget spreadsheet containing secured and unsecured funds for the Main Street plan, which is essential to the event center's success. Nothing yet. All this must be discussed as budget consideration and another reason to put the RDA $2 on hold until a preliminary analysis for owning a road segment is completed. Another question toward the budget we're going to discuss today is...
Okay, she ran out of time there. I'll go to the next message.
No one can honestly claim that the state line casino corridor is actually blighted. Yes, the casinos have seen their business decline out from the best years, but it is almost solely due to the marked increase in gaming establishments throughout the country, particularly by Indian gaming in California. It's called competition. It's doubtful that the South Shore casinos will ever get back to their former glory days, with or without a $100 million event center. The TDBA's presentation to the board in February indicated that the new $5 a night surcharge at Lake Lodging will raise $90 million in the next 30 years, more than enough to pay for the entire event center, especially when you add in the TOT and other fees. So why is the county being asked to bond $34.5 million for this project? That same report claims that the event center will generate an additional $625,000 per year for the county, while at the same time that it will generate $33 to $40 million per year in hotel, restaurant, entertainment, and retail in the South Shore area. Most of it for the casinos, but much of it for businesses in California. No wonder the TDBA and South Shore Chamber of Commerce support this project and the substantial funding from Douglas County. Our taxpayers are essentially being asked to advance more than a third of the cost, but would only stand to gain less than 2% of the added revenue in return. That doesn't seem like a wise return on investment, but it does seem overly risky for the county. And what are the casinos paying for the event center that will primarily benefit them? Nothing. Even though their win this January and February together was nearly $38 million. The casinos who stand to benefit most from an event center should pay a substantial part of the cost. The taxpayers of Douglas County should take much less of the risk. You're all Republicans and therefore must believe in free market, small government, and fiscal responsibility. This bond would be contrary to all of those principles. It would attempt to bail out private business interests while putting our taxpayers at risk. Some commissioners also seem determined not to give your constituents an opportunity to weigh in on this important issue in November, but rather to preempt that by approving this bond issue in the near future. That would be contrary to public interest. What is new, however, is the profound effect of the coronavirus and the subsequent shutdown of many of our businesses and what the effect that will have on revenues in Douglas County. Obviously, there will be substantial shortfalls of expected revenues and difficult cuts will have to be made. The first thing that should be cut is any and all funding for RDA2, including any bonding, and all tax increment funding for RDA2 should be suspended until the length and breadth of the shutdown can be determined. There are too many more important items that need public funding at this point than an event center that will primarily benefit the casinos. Thank you.
Okay, one more.
Ellie Waller, ELLIEWAL.
This is a duplicate.
Yep, I stopped that one. It looks like a duplicate. Let me verify they came from the same phone number. They did come from the same number. And I haven't seen the phone line ring since 1:05.
So we'll give it another 5 minutes and see if anybody's calling. I have 112. So we'll go to 117. Okay, it's 1:17. Have you received any further phone calls?
No additional calls.
All right, then we'll close public comment at this point. And we'd be looking for approval of the agenda.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve today's agenda for April 7th, 2020.
A second.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Nelson and a second by Commissioner Rice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Motion carries 5-0. All right, next we'll be looking for approval of the previous minutes for the joint meeting on March 10th. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll move
I would
to approve the minutes of March 10, 2020, joint meeting of the Board of County Commissioners and the Planning Commission.
Second.
So I have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, a second by Commissioner Nelson. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. Then we will move to the administrative agenda. We have one item on the agenda for possible action. Discussion to approve the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 tentative budgets for Douglas County and the Douglas County Redevelopment Agency. Ms. Willoughby. Welcome, Terry.
Thank you. Terry Willoughby for the record. This is a process, a very interesting process that we're going through today. We are required to submit a tentative budget to the state of Nevada by April 15th. And so that's why we're bringing this forward today. We started this process back in November, meeting with departments. They were instructed to use fiscal year 2018-19 actual expenditures as their baseline budgets, and they would extract any unusual or one-time expenses from those 18-19 actual expenses to come up with a baseline budget. And they were to not add any supplemental requests or capital items into that budget. So that's the budget we have before you today for fiscal year 2021. As you know, there's been many changes every day due to the COVID-19. So these revenues are not adjusted for any expected shortfalls next fiscal year due to the COVID-19 crisis. These were the original revenue projections that we developed over many months, looking at 5-year averages and using estimates from the state of Nevada Department of Taxation. I will let you know I've had conversations with the Department of Taxation asking about whether they're going to adjust their revenue estimates, particularly for the consolidated tax, and they are not going to adjust them at this point. They feel that they were conservative, and so what we used was conservative. So we are still expecting some reductions, and we've been working with departments, and this budget is not going to be what your final budget looks like. We will be making, I expect, many changes. I'm working with departments, developed a schedule of percentage of budget cuts depending on their funding source, and ask that they submit those initial cuts back to me by April 15th. So I expect to be bringing you an update of some sort for next fiscal year, probably around the first week of May, first meeting in May. I'll bring an update, and then we would bring the final budget to you the end of May and submit that to the State Department of Taxation by June 1st. So the budget you have before you today represents about almost $43 million in expenditures, and that's funded by resources that are equal to that. But again, this is not going to be what the final budget looks like. And that's still something we're still working on. A lot of it depends on how long this lasts. And I think I would have a better idea by the time we bring back the final budget. We were very conservative in our projections to begin with. We used 5-year averages for most of the revenue. If it wasn't something the state provided, we were using 5-year averages, working with departments on all of their budgeted expenditures and looking at revenue estimates. We had almost all the department presentations in and completed. And in a normal world, that's what you would have seen today. Over the last week in March, we would have had department presentations. They would have been talking about their budgets changes, and because of the COVID, we just pulled all that out. And today we're just asking you to approve the budget as presented, and we will submit that to the state and bring back a changed budget for the final budget. I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right. Well, thank you. Any questions from commissioners? Get a full screen view.
Can you see? I've got my hand up. Engels.
I can see.
Okay.
ahead.
Ms. Willoughby, this really started in March. I don't remember, it was about the second or third week in March. We had an emergency management meeting, and that was about the time all of this was really starting. So we're probably not even a full month into it. Do you have, or is there any indication of what the revenue impact actual might be? I know it's a pretty short time. We talked about this last week, I think, and I was wondering if you have any indication. Are we seeing a 10% drop off, a 40% drop off? Is there any indication of anything at all? Thank you.
The last report I've seen of taxable sales was from January of 2020, so there wouldn't have been any effect yet. So it's kind of soon for the reporting to catch up with the effect at this point. But I can tell you that 18% of Douglas County taxable sales is from restaurants. So you know that there's going to be a large impact. So I expect to see some, but I don't know the magnitude.
Any other questions? Commissioners, raise your hand or see if I can bring it back up. I don't see any hands.
Nelson's got his hand up.
Who does?
Nelson.
Mr. Nelson.
Thank you. Ms. Willoughby, I know there's been a lot of information out on a lot of sources about the economy and what we're going to be seeing. I know we haven't seen any direct impact yet because it's still pretty early for us to have that. But I was wondering if you can perhaps surmise if we're looking at maybe a 5 or 10% drop in revenues for next year, or any kind of an estimate you would like to give us.
I can tell you for general fund departments right now, I'm asking for an initial 5% budget reduction scenario. And they're to provide a second tier just in case I want to be prepared for the worst. So 5% is the initial, and we are having them come up with, if we need it, we want something in our back pocket that we already have a plan for.
Okay, thank you. I think we're probably going to see more than that, but it's a good place to start. Thank you.
Commissioner Walsh, Commissioner Rice, any comments?
No, sir.
None from me either. Thank you. That wasn't exactly my favorite reading. Well, I've been locked up in my office here, but again, thank you for putting together a document that was easy to read, easy to understand. We appreciate that.
It certainly was not as comprehensive as I would normally put together, but really, this is, again, not what you're going to see at final budget. So
I got a couple questions for you, Ms. Welby. The first is that the documents that we were presented with, as we go through each of the individual areas, some are not even funded, and there are no numbers in them at all. For instance, the Sheriff's Patrol Division.
So if I could address that quickly, the sheriff did reorganize some of their departments, their divisions within there. So they've moved people and expenses around to better suit their structure. So where it may have had budget or expenses in a prior year, it's located in another one next year. They had planned on, during their department presentation, kind of doing a walkthrough of where, how those transfers occurred, but everything is funded in fiscal year 21.
It also showed in the roads division, same thing. No, nothing there, although the RTC was plussed up. Is that because they're reorganizing that?
Probably, I will have to look into that one for specifically. I know that, for example, like in judicial services, in District Court 1 and 2 were separate in prior years. They're now going to be combined in one district court because it makes sense for them. So I think everybody was going to discuss that during their presentations, and you would see that explanation during final. I will certainly look at roads and get that answer back for you.
Well, this final, or the next time that we get together, will we have it fleshed out so we know what's in each location?
Yes, the departments all know, and they had all planned on addressing that during their departmental presentation. So that will definitely be addressed during the final budget presentations.
I'm glad the departments all know, but we also need to know. That's why.
Right, and so that was part of their presentation. They were instructed to explain things like that.
Okay, is your explanation to the state going to reflect where the monies went on those divisions that have nothing in their budget?
Correct. The report we provide to the state is at a summarized level, and it's not going to show as a change.
Will you show us that report or send us copies of that?
Absolutely. It'll be posted on our website, and I'll make sure everyone gets a copy.
Since we're a policy organization, and the beginning of the 1920, the 19 and 20 fiscal year budget, there are several things that probably need to be revised. And I'm reading from that budget. When it talks about strategic objectives, we have 6 of them. And I'll briefly say them: infrastructure, safe communities, economic vitality, natural resources, financial stability, and organizational sustainment. It would seem to me that we're going to have to change our priorities to give you guidance in terms of the policy. For instance, I would think that while infrastructure is important, probably the things moving to the top would be financial stability, and then economic vitality, and then infrastructure, and then safe communities, and so on down the line. I don't know what the rest of the commission feels about that, but I think from a policy point of view, we should be giving you some direction on what we think are the priorities, as they're going to have to be reprioritized as we face coming out of the COVID-19, hopefully, virus attack and moving forward. Do you need that, or are you going to provide how you've looked at it and give it back to us?
No, it's
the county manager going to do that.
Well, I think we should have, and I'll look to Patrick for his guidance on this. I think in case we get to the place where we have to make some hard decisions, we will need to have priority from the board and the community. So I'll work with Patrick on how we put that together.
Commissioner Ingles?
I think the chair has got a point, and our primary focus should be financial because of the draconian nature of the situation that we are currently in. It would appear that our sales tax is going to drop off substantially. Nothing's open. No restaurants are open, some takeout. The casinos, we're getting some gas tax, but it's minimal. The revenue could drop by over 50% just in sales tax. And the other taxes are going to be down too, because there's no tourism, there's just really no economic activity generating revenue except some very basic things. I haven't been out of the house in 2 weeks. And I don't know about everybody else, but we did it. We went and did a takeout once, but that isn't really going to help. But so in regard to the 6 items, I think we could just about put the others aside for the time being and put our whole focus and energy on the financial side of it. Thank you.
And I think as far as that, I think we would definitely want to have some of that discussion, but as far as achieving financial stability, I think it's going to come down to making choices, some hard choices. What is the primary value? Is it public safety, safe communities, or infrastructure? Are we going to fund the RTC transfer from the general fund? But those are all policy decisions that should be brought back to the board, and I'd be happy to do that.
I think that's a good point. And public safety has a priority along with public health. But the real cost entity is going to be public safety, and that has to be maintained. So you're on the right track. It's just how bad it's going to get.
Correct. And there's a possibility some of the casinos are very hopeful that it's going to come back and we'll get back and running on April 30th and they'll be back to normal by July 1st. But I don't know. We just don't know right now. So I'm hopeful in another 30 days, we have a little bit more information to bring to you.
You know, I think the other thing that comes out of this discussion that we just had is how are we going to help them come out of it as quickly as possible? Because their recovery is important not only to the residents here, but it's also important to what we're trying to do in terms of the county itself. And it will impact all of us. In terms of things that are going to go down, certainly revenue from the C-tax will go down. But what percentage is the C-tax, which was 12 million last year, what percentage of that is general fund revenue?
Let me pull that up. Let me get that real quick.
Okay, and the other part of that is that mandatorily ad valorem taxes will go up. That's legislated by the legislation, by the state. And there's a 3% cap of increases on residential property and a 8% cap on commercial property. So that's got to be factored into the equation. So we will have some increases and we're going to have some decreases. And we need to kind of have a broad understanding of what those are before we start reordering the priorities, I would think. So when we get back together, if you could provide and you've had several questions about what the revenue forecast is going to look like. And I know you can't look into the crystal ball, but you do have several things that are legislated.
Correct.
Just ad valorem increase. So maybe you could give us
we just received amended ad valorem estimates last week from the state. They've amended those several times. I'm hoping those are more positive and hoping that we don't see any impact on property tax from COVID-19. So
what about increase? Is it an increase?
It is an increase. I have not looked into, I just received the last estimates a couple days ago. So, but it is an increase.
Okay, so we need to know what that total was going to look like in those various areas. And the other part of that is the C-tax not only includes sales tax, but it also includes real estate transfer tax.
Correct. The state's projections included an increase. We've adjusted that back down for final budget because we expect that that's not going to grow. So that'll be flat for next year or decreased.
Real estate transfer tax will go down?
Or be flat. It's not as going to, we don't expect it to grow as much as the state projected.
And what are you basing those expectations on? the fact that COVID-19 is not allowing any sales?
They are experiencing a slowdown in real estate activity for the moment. That may pick back up in a couple months, but right now it seems to be slowing down.
Seems to be, isn't a good way to, in my view, to look at that. I think we need some hard data on what those sales are, what they're potentially being. And I don't think any one of us really knows that. We need input from realtors or the
Correct.
department.
I was researching some articles from the state of Nevada, published in the Reno newspaper about the effect on real estate market. So, but by the time we get back together in 30 days, they'll expect to have more hard data.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm getting at. So we can align our priorities with the income so we can make some
Correct.
intelligent decisions. Okay. Any other questions from board members? Commissioner Nelson?
Yeah, I think it's pretty safe to say that the COVID-19 is not going to disappear in a month or two, and people are going to change their habits for probably at least 6 months. So I would look for a downturn of at least 6 months at this point. I did have one question on the CAFR that was handed out. I was going through the FTEs and was shocked to see that we added 59 FTEs between 18 and 19. And I was wondering, did you figure this figure differently or something to make that huge jump? Or
I believe it was, it's just a different way of calculation. I'll have to go back and look at that. And I've asked it to be restated for the CAFR. So to go back and do all 10 years if we can.
yeah, I think we had one other large jump in 14, 15, but this one looked very, very suspicious. I know if it was tires, we'd probably really be worried at this point. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Further questions? Seeing none. We don't need a motion on this, do we, Mr. Ritchie? We just had a discussion.
Doug Ritchie for the record. No, you don't need a motion.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion? Okay. Commissioner Walsh?
Sure, I would move to approve the fiscal year 2020-21 tentative budgets for Douglas County and the Douglas County Redevelopment Agency.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Walsh, second by Commissioner Rice. Let's discuss this a little bit. Since we don't have a complete budget, and as I talked about earlier, I would like to give them the latitude to adjust those numbers as they see necessary, and not have them hemmed in by this incomplete budget that we have. I would therefore suggest that we not pass a motion that hems them to that, or we redo your motion to allow them the latitude to do that.
I believe that Terry has to submit the budgets by April 15th. I don't know what kind of latitude you want. Terry, do you anticipate?
This is for so you could make the motion to approve the tentative budget with the caveat that I will bring back a final budget.
Okay, I will amend my.
That works, everyone.
I'll amend my motion then with the caveat that the CFO will bring back a final budget after these initial budgets are submitted to the state.
The tentative budget?
Initial tentative.
Commissioner Ingalls?
This tentative budget is going where? The state?
To the state. It's a required legislative requirement that we file a tentative budget by April 15th.
Right. Now, when we look at everything, everything's been shut down. And a lot of our revenue of all sorts comes from California. And California is in general lockdown. So none of that money's coming here. if we sent this tentative budget to the state, would that be misleading the state? Just a thought, because they're going to look at that and they go, well, Douglas County is submitting this, and then they consolidate that into the state budget.
I
Do they
can
not?
tell you that most counties are doing the same thing we did. We didn't have time to react, change revenue estimates, get departments to make adjustments in time to make the legislative requirements. I had asked if they were going to extend the deadline because of this unprecedented COVID-19 issue and was told no. So I don't think that I think because it's not the final budget, I don't think they would see it as misleading. It's the tentative budget.
Go
It
ahead.
would seem that in the budgeting process, it has been my experience that we always make certain assumptions that go into the evolution of a budget. And we should be making some assumptions that will help you to get an idea of what we're going to be up against, rather than taking historically what it was from, say, last year or the last couple of years. Those are pretty good years, but everything's just fallen off a cliff right now. And it doesn't seem to be getting all that much better that fast. And even if it does, we're going to be into mid-year before, assuming under the best of circumstances, everything gets back to normal. In 6 months is a stretch. And submitting a tentative budget that we're going to make probably draconian changes in, that might be misleading the state and even ourselves. Now, really all we have to work with is revenue, because we don't know what's going to happen to all our sources of revenue. There may be some property taxes taking a hit. We don't know.
We don't expect the majority of the major component of general fund revenue is ad valorem property tax. We don't expect at this time that there's going to be any adjustment needed for those revenues. The assessed values have already been set, so everything's in place. It would take a drastic measure for the property tax revenues to fall, and we would not know that until probably October of next year. So unfortunately, we do have a state legislative requirement to submit a tentative budget. So this was the best we had. We had a great system of coming up with estimates and working, taking the economy into account. And then the world kind of stopped in the middle of the last few weeks. So it's an unprecedented time. It's not like the Great Recession where where you have some triggers and signs that were coming. I think at this point, it was a great economy. Everything was booming. I can tell you that I ran some numbers through March as the chairman had requested for the general fund, and we were right on target. Last year, we were at 76% of revenues of the total year were collected. This year, we are at 77% of the total budget already collected through March 31st. And I don't think that's with all entries done for March. Room tax, we were already at, as far as room tax revenues for this fiscal year, we had already collected 95% of our estimated revenues as of March 31st. So while we expected to augment the room tax budget, we're just not going to collect as much over as we thought. So it was a strong economy. Everything was going great, and then it stopped. So it's very unprecedented. There's some situations with another in Thailand where they had similar, the typhoon and similar recovery scenarios where it was very strong and then stopped. But we just don't know at this point.
Well, that's true. And we can't, we're not epidemiologists, even nobody knows what this stuff is going to do. All we know is that it's a very contagious of a pathogen, and it has had impact on the economy. And we can't look at it from so much a medical perspective as we have to look at it from a economic perspective. I think you're right. You've got a pretty good idea of what has been collected thus far, and it's going to be a cash flow situation coming up pretty quick. I suspect that there's going to be a lot of these restaurants in the county that will never recover. And so the long-term economic impact is going to be significant. And we haven't even hit the downside yet because we don't even know.
Right.
So, I mean,
what I would suggest is that we submit the budget as it's presented, and I'd be happy to add language to the submission, and I'll give that to Patrick first. We can share it with you. That does advise the state that this is a tentative budget, that we expect major changes before the final is approved.
Okay, well, that's probably the best we can do. I mean, everybody's got to be aware of what's going on. And it was interesting to note that the governor allowed the car dealerships to stay open. Well, those are essential to Carson because they've got the strip mall up there with the car dealerships. But I'm sure even with them staying open, they've taken a substantial hit. And that's a big source of sales tax revenue. That represents 27% of the sales tax for Carson. And so I think it's wise to put in a caveat, as you suggested, that this is going to change. We just don't know how much.
Correct.
Ms. Willoughby.
Well, I think Mr. Engel's point is well taken. And the one about the assumptions, it's always interesting to note what those assumptions are, and so that we can have an understanding of what was assumed for the future. So I would appreciate knowing what assumptions, and we've talked about this before, you're using to prepare the budget. And I would also like it related back to our budget document, because we have a very clear presentation of 5-year general fund, including $12 million from the C-tax. And each one of those revenue streams that go into total in the general fund, we should have an idea how they're going to change.
Correct. All that will be presented in the final budget. The plan was to do a much more in-depth presentation, and then
Yes, right.
all my assumptions sort of went out the window. So
I understand that. And you're going to have to do the same to present the final budget again, because all those assumptions will change between now and then.
Absolutely. I'm trying to change assumptions every day. I just heard that the governor has asked state departments to look for spending cuts. So it'll be interesting to see if they cut spending that's going to affect us.
Yeah, and I appreciate you following on a daily basis, as was previously mentioned by Commissioner Ingalls. We don't know the extent of this, but we know that there are going to be changes, and we've got to have sufficient flexibility to look at those changes and account for them. And I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I think that all of us have a concern about this, and the motion on the floor, I think that Commissioner Walsh took the 2 amendments to, I think is sufficient to cover us as well as meet the requirement to get it to the state by the 15th. Any further discussion? Commissioner Nelson.
Yeah, I tend to be very conservative on revenue coming in. I think we need to look at every possibility of making sure we're not having money go out where it doesn't really need to. And I really think we ought to take a look at RDA 2 again and try and bring that money back into the
RDA 2 will be discussed by itself on as one of the functions of the April 16th meeting. This meeting was noticed that we would discuss RDA funding, but that's not part of this motion unless you want to make it part of this motion.
Not part of the motion. I didn't get a chance to get your attention earlier.
So what are you saying? You want to discuss it separately, or you want to discuss it in accordance with this motion? Dave?
I've got my point out there. That's fine.
Okay, fine. All right. Then we'll call for the vote on the motion by Commissioner Walsh. Do you want to reiterate the motion just in case people have forgotten, or is everybody sufficient in their understanding of the motion?
We're good.
Good. Okay. And I'll call for the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any nays? No nays. Motion carries. All right. Then we've done our one action for the day. I think it would be important for us to say that it is amazing how our county has responded to the stay-at-home order. And I think that statistics of the spread within the county show that the county residents have done a tremendous job. We've had no new reports. We still have the 7 reported, but we have a new figure showing 4 more recovered. So we only have 3 that are in self-quarantine right now, which is amazing. But it also is reflective of how this county follows the rules. So I appreciate that. And I think it's something that we should look forward to in resolving this crisis. With that said, any other comments from the board? Then I'll open this to public comment. So it'll be open for 5 minutes, starting now.
Natalie Wood, for the record, I have one to start playing.
Okay. That ends the 5-minute start. All right, go ahead.
ELLIEWALLER, closing public comment, period. I take some issue with the public comment process. It's improved from the first one, but it's still broken. If a citizen or organization wants to provide a comment, let's say, for example, on trash service issues, not on the agenda, and then detailed comments on the budget, like today's agenda item, 3 minutes is not enough for 2 separate types of comments. This is depriving the individual or organization ample opportunity and right to comment separately. I suggest revising the process, allow on agenda and not agenda items at the beginning at 3 minutes each. My budget comments now are moved. I will save those, and I will be sure to send in detailed written comments in a sufficient amount of time for review for the board members, along with what I tried to state in 3 minutes as suggested for on and off agenda items. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this meeting today.
That's the only message received so far, and I have not seen it ring again.
Well, we'll leave it open then again for 5 minutes. It's 1:56. So we'll keep it open for another 5 minutes.
Has Jerry Turner called in?
John, I don't recall hearing a voicemail come from him at the last meeting, and not today either.
I hope he's okay.
I certainly do. Got 1 minute left. Any calls, Natalie?
Natalie,
Yes, sir.
there's no indication of any county employees coming down with anything?
I couldn't speak to that, sir.
Well,
I
I'm
wouldn't have
sure
that
if
information.
something happened, you would know about it.
Yeah.
That's excellent. That's good. It's most fortunate.
We have
Yes,
not
it
received
is.
any voicemails for public comment, and I have not seen the phone ring.
Okay, then we'll conclude public comment and we'll adjourn. Thank you very much for you all being here. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you.